what I want to share with you is not the way that shooting should be taught. That would be very egotistical of me to make that determination that this is how shooting, these are the things that we should be teaching. I'm going to teach you what I teach. This is what I believe in, the way that works for me, the framework that I start with my players. But with every single person, you branch off of ideal, or whatever you determine ideal to be. Because they don't have an ideal body, they don't have ideal habits, they don't have an ideal background. They are their own person. You start with your own template and your own framework, and you branch off as much as you possibly can to fix that person. So have a theory. Know it like the back of your hand, and then go out and cause improvement or help somebody else cause improvement. So where I start, what I do with players, the ideas, everything that I refer back to when I work with a player comes back to two simple things that fall under the category I call positive power. So imagining that the hoop is at the other end of the center line here. When your body moves, it generates energy. And when we create that energy, we give it to the basketball to get the ball moving, and hopefully getting the ball going towards the hoop, hopefully through the hoop. If the hoop that I'm shooting at is at the other end of this center line here, this is an imaginary line that you have on every single shot that you shoot, I call it the target line. You need to generate energy as much as possible along that target line. That's the energy that we're going to give to the basketball. That's the direction we want the basketball going. But you can't just roll the ball along the floor and expect it to go in if it goes along the target line. We also have to get the ball going up in the air. So I'm really concerned about creating energy at the target and straight up in the air with as many body parts as you possibly can get. And you can still make shots by generating energy with some body part that is off your target line in any direction. We can still make that shot. All we have to do is compensate by having another body part generating energy that is equal and opposite. And those two will cancel each other out to create straight. We can do it, and we do it all the time. We just don't want that to be our habit. We want, instead of a scope that is this wide and habits that are this wide that we're trying to cancel each other out, we always want to narrow that as much as we possibly can. 8-year-olds are terrible at this. 8-year-olds, they have so little power in their body, and the ball is so big and the hoop is so high that they have a very wide scope, a lot of energy going in a whole bunch of different directions because they're using every part of their body just to get the ball up to the hoop. So as they get older and stronger, more power comes into their body. They're able to use that. They're able to narrow their scope so that the things are working more towards the target and straight up in the air. And that's what our goal constantly is. Even at the NBA level, we're not trying to do complicated things. We're trying to simplify the shooting motion. We're trying to get more energy created at the target, more energy straight up in the air from the target. So if ever you're lost, you see a player and you don't know what to do with them, you don't know where to start, just start with that idea. How do I create energy at the hoop? How do I create more that goes straight up in the air from the target line? So again, my goal today isn't to teach you how shooting should be taught. My goal is to give you some ideas. And if all that happens today is you come out of this session with one new way of saying the same old thing, that's a big win. Okay? Your goal isn't to change everything about the way that you teach shooting and adopt my principles because I'm the NBA guy. That's BS. That doesn't matter. Your goal is just to find one little thing that you can get better at, one little idea, one little phrase. So we're starting with positive power. I want to move into my shooting non-negotiables. We're going to talk about 3 things today that no matter who you are, what your body composition is, what your current habits are, 3 things that have to happen when you shoot the basketball. Okay, no matter what the theory that the coach has, these 3 things have to happen as much as possible. And that's the caveat that we're going to keep coming back to. This is not a perfect game. We're not playing golf on a simulator at the driving range. Even golf is not isolated. But we're trying to do that as much as we possibly can. So, non-negotiable number 1, I need the middle of your hand to shoot the middle of the basketball. If the middle of your hand can shoot the middle of the basketball, the ball is going to go straight. That's just simple physics. So, the example that I like to give is billiards. We'll imagine that the intersection of this red line and the black line is the pocket in billiards, in pool and snooker. This is the 8 ball. This is the ball that I want to go in that pocket. To get this ball to go in the pocket, the cue ball needs to contact this ball right there. And no matter the angle that you shoot from, if you can contact the target ball right there, it's going to go into that pocket. How do you figure out where that point is? You draw an imaginary line through the middle of the pocket, through the middle of the basketball, which is why I put the scene there, and wherever that line comes out, that's where the contact point has to be. Okay? And if you can get that ball to contact here, this ball is going to go in the pocket regardless of the angle that you shoot it at. Okay? You can shoot from here. If it contacts there, the ball is going in the pocket. You can cut the ball across here. If it contacts there, the ball is going in the pocket. That is snooker, that is billiards, that is also shooting. If you get the middle of your hand on the bottom of the basketball, you have a chance to lift it up. If you get your hand over on the right side of the basketball, even if you try and lift it straight up in the air, the ball goes to the left. You're pushing the right side of the ball more than the left, the ball will go to the left. If you push the left side of the ball more than the right, the ball goes to the right. Okay? We need to get the middle of our hand underneath the center of the basketball, then lift straight up, and if we do, a couple of things happen. The ball spins purely if you push the middle of the ball along the target line. The ball will spin purely, but more importantly, it goes straight. So I watch the spin of the basketball a lot, not because I need the shooter to have perfect spin, because that's going to cause the ball to go in more. Not for that reason. I want to check the spin of the basketball because it will indicate whether they push the middle of the ball along the target line. Okay? That's really what you're trying to figure out when you watch the spin of the ball. If they get the ball spinning in a tornado motion or some other impure motion, all it means is they haven't pushed the middle of the ball along the target line. You get over on the side of the basketball, if you push along the target line, the ball doesn't quite spin purely. Okay? It's close, but not quite. If you get on the bottom of the basketball and you don't push along the target line, it doesn't spin purely. And it makes it really tough for that to consistently go straight, that ball to consistently go straight. We need the middle of the hand to shoot the middle of the basketball. Now we got to figure out what the middle of your hand is. And this will be different or it's possible that this is going to be different for every single person out there. But I've found in my travels and thousands of kids and players that I've worked with that 90% of people, the middle of their hand is actually the index finger when they take the proper grip on the basketball. So everybody, what I want you to do right now is take an imaginary basketball in your hand and grip it with your hand nice and wide. Spread your thumb out, spread your fingers, because bigger hands will control the ball better. Why are 8-year-olds not so great at shooting? Because they've got small hands and their margin for error is very small. Make your hand fairly wide. Then with your non-shooting hand, measure the distance between your index finger and your thumb. Compare that now to index finger to the tip of your pinky. For, I would say, 90% of us, that is going to be either exactly the same or really darn close, okay? And we need to make sure that we spread that thumb out. Now, if you get your thumb narrow here, then this is not going to be the same. This measurement will be only over to there, and I've got my pinky sticking out. I'm pushing the right side of the ball more than the left. If you get your thumb narrow, the middle finger would become the middle of your hand. But your hand is smaller. We don't want a smaller hand, we want a wider hand. Hand wide, check the measurements. I would say again, 90% of us are going to find that we are there for the middle, or at worst, the closest I've ever seen is a split. If you have an inflexible thumb, if you have a short thumb, if you have really flexible fingers, really long fingers, there could be some variety over into a split grip, but I've never seen anybody who the middle of their hand is actually their middle finger. So I pay a lot of attention to the set point, this position here where we transition from the lifting motion into the shooting motion. I call that the set point. And I need to see the middle of your hand on the bottom of the basketball at this point. This is a position we have a fair amount of control over. We have very little control over the release. We'd like to have a lot of control, but we've all shot a million shots that come off of our hand not quite right, but we know, okay, that's going in. They weren't perfect, but they were good enough. They come off your hand just a little bit differently, and your hand was able to compensate for it. That happens all the time. That's going to happen all the time. What we're trying to do is just put ourselves in a position to be as consistent with that as possible. So pay attention at that set point to is the middle of their hand on the bottom of the basketball, and if it is, then we can lift straight up in the air. Now, there's another part of this that as coaches, I think we do a poor job of. I think we miss the part that really matters, and we talk way too much about something that doesn't matter as much. We talk a lot about get your elbow in, and it's not wrong, but to me it doesn't get to the true heart of the issue, and I think we're missing the point when we do talk about it. I don't need your elbow in. I need the middle of your hand on the middle of the ball throughout your release. So right now, the middle of my hand is my index finger. I want to push along the middle of the ball with my index finger throughout the release. And if I can do that, the ball goes straight. What I don't want is to push across the ball, because the ball is now no longer going to go straight. To push across the ball, you get your elbow out. But more importantly, you change your contact point with the basketball. My index finger technically at my set point is on the bottom of the ball, but it's not along my target line. And because of that, as I snap my wrist, my hand is going to come off the middle of the basketball at that last critical moment and push the ball in the opposite direction. We need to make sure that we get index finger or whatever is the middle of your hand parallel to your target line throughout your release in order to get the ball to go straight. Okay? You can talk about it, and I do say at times, get your elbow in, only because I'm the player that I'm working with, that registers with them, that makes sense in their brain, or we haven't figured out the way that it makes sense to them, and so I'm just trying a bunch of different ways of saying, get your index finger along the target line. So I will say get your elbow in, but we can actually go too far with your elbow in. And the best example of this is Michael Kidd-Gilchrist. Does a fantastic job of getting his elbow in if that's what we really want to do. And if you're not aware of what Michael Kidd-Gilchrist looks like when he shoots the basketball, it's kind of right around here. His index finger is almost 90 degrees to his target line, but his elbow's in really well. As he shoots the basketball at that last critical moment, his hand comes over onto the left side of the basketball, and he ends up pushing the ball to the right. His body knows that. His body has learned that. Now he's snapping his wrist back that direction, and he's rotating his body that direction to try and compensate for this mistake that he made, or that he continually makes. And we need to be able to get to the bottom of the basketball and along the target line. And if you've seen photographs of me working with players, I can almost guarantee the player is standing somewhere around here, and I would be standing right about here. I try, and this is the beauty of working in the NBA, is I've got somebody to pass for me, I've got somebody to rebound for me. I get to stand wherever I want, and I stand behind the player as much as I possibly can and slightly to their shooting hand side, and I'm watching their index finger at their set point. And you guys don't have that luxury. And I need to acknowledge quickly, your job is way harder than mine. And so that's why I said in the beginning, you're not going to take everything that I say, because we live in different worlds. Mine is not better than yours. My world, I have all the luxuries of somebody to rebound, somebody to pass for me, an hour at a time with one player multiple times a day for as long as we need. I've got an entire off season where teams are saying to, don't play, we want you working on your skills. You guys, oh my God, your job is impossible. You have 12 to 15 players who are learning the game still, all with horrible, or not horrible, scratch that from the record, all with different habits that we're trying to improve. And you're teaching them every skill in the game, plus there's one or two of you, you get them for 90 minutes a week, you stand little chance. But you do your best. And so you're not necessarily going to be able to do things the same way that I do it, because I have all these luxuries given to me that you may not have. Try and find something that you can grab onto and work on and improve. So shooting non-negotiable, number one, the middle of your hand has to shoot the middle of the basketball. Shooting non-negotiable, number two, the ball has to get up in the air. We can't shoot the ball along our target line 5 feet off the ground and expect it to go in. We need the ball getting up in the air, dropping down on the hoop. So I need you to put your body in a position where you're able to create true and honest arc. Put players' bodies in a position where they can create true and honest arc. And I focus a lot, again, on the set point. And I spend a lot of time, my poor players spend weeks working on a simple drill of just finding their set point and reinforcing it in different ways so that they're able to find this position. It helps with the alignment, like we've talked about, and it's going to help with the arc, like we're about to talk about. At your set point, the ball goes in the opposite direction of wherever the middle of your hand is. If you want the ball going up in the air, you have to get your hand on the bottom of the ball. We can't get your hand on the back of the basketball and expect to lift very well. It doesn't work. And that's what Bismack Biyombo came to the Orlando Magic with, the flattest shot I had ever seen. And the first thing that we talked about was, we're not changing a thing until other than trying to get more arc on the basketball. We'll let you have all your other habits, but we have to get the ball up in the air. Go and look at Bismack's shot from, I forget what year it was, whatever year he was a part of the Raptors going to the Eastern Conference Final. There are a lot of shots that he shot that never cleared the front rim. At their highest point, like at its apex, it was still level or below the front of the rim. So we had to learn to get the ball up in the air and dropping down on the hoop. Bismack had a very flat wrist. His hand was on the back of the basketball. The ball goes in the opposite direction of wherever the middle force applied to it is. If the middle of the force is on the back of the ball, it's going to go forward. We had to learn to get the wrist bent back of his shooting hand so his hand gets on the bottom of the basketball, and ideally with his elbow low enough that he could then create a lifting motion. Okay? Those two things fit together. You have to get your wrist bent back so that your hand gets underneath the basketball, and then you have to leave your elbow low enough that it can generate some upward force. Okay? And that brings me to a different player who had, again, a flat shot, Dwayne Dedmon, but for a totally different reason. He brought the ball back over top of his head, might have had his wrist bent back. In his case, he didn't, but he could still have the wrist bent back and end up with a flat shot in this case. Because when you get the ball back over your head, there's no lift left in your elbow. The elbow is now already lifted, it's already high, I can't create any more lift from it, so all I'm left as a shooting motion with is here, this part is up, that generates some lift, but then it transitions into a forward motion, and then it transitions into downward at your release. So you're asking a forward and downward motion to create an upward force, and it doesn't happen. So these people end up with flat shots as well. For Dwayne, we needed to drop that down, find the same set point with the wrist bent back and the elbow low enough to generate some up force. Again, I spend a ton of time working on defining where that set point is and putting players in different positions to be able to find that set point regardless of where the ball has started, so that we can create a short, compact, simple shooting motion. The set point, and this is really important to understand when we're working with younger players, the set point does not mean the ball has to stop. Okay, it doesn't mean you have to shoot a two-motion shot with a pause at your set point. Steph Curry's a one-motion shooter, and we're all aware that he's pretty successful with it. Klay Thompson, I think, is a two-motion shooter. He's very successful with it. At the NBA level, I let players decide whether they're one-motion or they're two-motion. At the youth level, I think just about everybody should be a one-motion shooter. They should be using this force to generate power that they give to the basketball, create a longer motion that generates a little bit more power, but the set point should be the same. So regardless if you're a one-motion shooter or a two-motion shooter, if I take a photograph, a still picture of you here, hopefully that photograph shows the middle of your hand on the bottom of the basketball and along your target line. If you can do that, the ball is going to go straight, okay? Assuming you can get your non-shooting hand off the ball. I used to have one of my 3 shooting non-negotiables being get your non-shooting hand off the ball. But the reality is, you can push the ball with your non-shooting hand and get the ball to go straight. It's just harder to do because you have 2 variables. So I want to minimize it as much as I possibly can. In a perfect world, I want to get the non-shooting hand off the basketball, but I have to acknowledge there are people out there who are successful pushing with it ever so slightly. Do I think they would be more consistent if they could get rid of the 2 variables that are pushing across the target line? Yes, I do. But if you're Kyrie Irving and you're making 85% of your free throws and 41% of your threes and you can perform that, do I really want to make you uncomfortable to try and get you 1 or 2% better? At that level, maybe I don't. And those are the kind of things that you're constantly discussing as a staff and with yourself and the player. Is the reward of changing your shooting mechanics worth the work that you're going to have to put into it? And if it's just 1 or 2% that you stand to get better, then maybe you stay with what's comfortable. If they're able to execute it at a high rate, maybe you stay with it. If they're a 42% free throw shooter, obviously what they're doing is not working for them right now, and you need to be changing that. So shooting non-negotiable number 1, the middle of your hand has to shoot the middle of the basketball. Shooting non-negotiable number 2, you have to get the ball dropping down on the hoop. Okay? And I'm going to save a bunch of time here for specific questions. Okay, I'm teaching you the things that are important to me, but I want to make sure that we get the specific questions that are important to you as well. So know that I'm going to save probably half an hour or so for more specific questions at that point. Shooting non-negotiable number 3, try and be as on balance as possible. Not always possible. You're not always in control of the environment in a game as a player, but you should be working to be as balanced and stable as possible. Why do we make such a high rate of free throws? Because we're at a reasonable distance. Okay, it's not too far out that causes us to generate more power, and it's negative power which pushes the ball off the target line. We're at a reasonable distance, and we have as much time as we need to stop the bad energy. Why do we shoot a lower percentage in games? Because you're moving constantly, creating all kinds of bad energy with very little time to stop it. So if those two things are true, if you can stop the bad energy as quickly as possible, it stands to reason that you're going to make more shots. You're going to be more consistent. So being as on balance as possible. Can I borrow one of you guys? I'm sorry that you guys are sitting around through all of this. And can I borrow one of you right now? I don't care who it is. Nice and quick, one of you. Jump up. Awesome. What's your name? Alyssa? Nice to meet you. I'm Dave. Thank you for helping. Can you come and stand on the target line for me, Alyssa? Facing the coach that's there. And put your feet right together. Okay, so this is the least balanced position that Alyssa could be in. Her base is very narrow. To get her to fall over, all I have to do is I have to get her center of gravity, which is right around her belly button, outside the widest part of her base. So the widest part of her base would be right about there. All I have to do is move her belly button over about 2 or 3 inches, and she's going to fall over. Let's see how this goes. Obviously, don't fall over. Catch yourself before we get there. Okay? All I have to do is apply a very little bit of force and move her belly button 2 or 3 inches over to that side, and she loses her balance. Okay? If that energy is being now generated that direction in a shooting motion, obviously we're going to give some of that to the basketball. The ball's going to go that direction potentially. Or we need to do something else to compensate for it. The easiest way to become more stable is to get your feet wider apart. I'm going to cough here. Excuse me. The reference point that I use for the feet is different than what most people do, but the same at the same time. I'm so annoyed at the person who coined the phrase shoulder width apart, because everybody take a second for me and look at both of your shoulders at the same time. Try and look at both of your shoulders at the same time. See how... Everybody, right now, take a look at your shoulders and see how wide they are. We can't. We have no idea. We're taking a guess at how wide our own shoulders are. Most of the time when we're talking shoulder width apart, we're looking at our feet. Our hips are about the same width as our shoulders. When we look down at our feet, we can see our hips. I don't know why this person didn't pick hip width apart instead of shoulder width apart at this point. Again, they're about the same. Alyssa, hips, shoulders about the same width. Me, hips, shoulders about the same width. Okay, we can use that as just our reference point. And I would encourage you to talk about hips because we can actually see them. Where I measure for the feet, though, is I want to see the insides of a player's feet about the same width as their hips. Okay, so right in about there. That is my ideal. Now, you don't always get your ideal, but this is what I'm working towards as much as I possibly can. And everybody says, well, that's pretty wide, Dave. And I say, yes, I want to kind of over-prepare because I may not get exactly this in a game. I want to over-prepare for it a little bit so that if anything, we're too stable and not powerful enough because we can find power other places. Then, if you think for a second, who do we kind of list as the player that has the best form in the NBA? Like, who is the name that 90% of us throw out there when we talk about the best form? You're smiling, Coach. Who do you have? Klay Thompson. Okay, not everybody agrees, but a lot of people point to him as having the beautiful form, and I totally agree. His feet are that wide when he shoots the basketball. We all agree that he has great feet, or great form, and he probably has one of the widest set of feet in the NBA. So let's look at somebody else. Let's go to Steve Nash on free throws. Steve Nash, by the way, best free throw shooter in the history of the NBA if Steph misses his next one. They're so close that if Steph misses one, he falls below Steve. If he makes 2 more, he jumps above Steve. They're that close. But that's where Steve Nash positioned his feet when he shot free throws, hip width apart. Okay, not because of me. I had nothing to do with that process. I was involved with the Suns, but he did not get that from me. That's where he decided was the optimal position for him. And by the way, it led him to be the best in the world ever. So this is where we want to be. A little trick that I'll use, Alyssa, can you put your feet right back together again? A little trick that I'll use with players to help them find this position and just to kind of prove the point. I'm going to push you on this shoulder, not very hard, but just a little bit to get you off balance. You're going to move your right foot only to get your balance back, and then leave your foot wherever it lands. Okay? You know what's happening? Okay, here we go. Okay? So I pushed her, I got her a little bit off balance. This is where her body went to get stable. This is where I want you to be able to shoot out of. If this is where your body naturally goes to get your balance back when it's off balance, you're going to constantly be off balance in games and fighting to get it back, be able to shoot from that position. Now, there's a concession I have to make here. This is not the most powerful position. If you want to jump as high as you possibly can, you're going to put your feet underneath your knees underneath your hips, hips underneath your shoulders. You're going to get all those joints in a line to generate as much power as you possibly can. Do you know what the most stable position that you could be in? No. Be even more stable than that. I'm going to do it here, and I'm going to look really stupid, and this is going to be on video. Okay, I hope this can actually show up on video. The most stable position you could get into looks like that. Get low and wide. That's where stability is. We want stability. We want power too. Okay? You can find power other places, so I'm willing personally to sacrifice some power to get more stable. So we need a combination of those two things. This is kind of where I like to be. Alyssa, that's, I think, all I need from you. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. And again, girls, I'm sorry this is so boring. I've been trying to figure out how to incorporate more people into this, but I'll be honest, I haven't done a ton of them. So, shooting non-negotiable, number 1, middle of your hand shoots the middle of the ball. Shooting non-negotiable, number 2, the ball has to get up in the air. We got to get our hand underneath the basketball with room to create a lifting motion to get the ball up in the air. Shooting non-negotiable at number 3, on every single shot, you're trying to be as on balance as possible. Okay? Then you get into all these they're negotiable. There's things that I would like to happen, but I don't need to have happen perfectly. So we have a little time. I'm going to spend some time going into what some of my negotiables are. And this is where we can start to fight, and we can start to argue. And it'll be fun. I personally want toes pointed at the target. And I'll start with this one because this is a hot debate that people like to go back and forth on. I have pretty strong opinions on it, but keep in mind, this is negotiable. I can let you have a little bit of play in here. We can compensate for what I think is a mistake in here fairly easily. So it's negotiable. And I'm willing to let a player be a little bit more comfortable if the habit isn't super detrimental. Everything's a sliding scale of gray. I mean, I just gave you 3 things that are as black or white as possible, but even those are probably an off shade of white and a very dark shade of gray. They're not set in stone. Okay, so why do I teach toes at the target? And everybody will say, well, you look at the best shooters, none of them point their toes at the target when they shoot 3-point shots. Correct. Very few players actually do get their feet squared on 3-point shots. What percentage do they make? The best ones make like 42% of their threes. Free throws. The best players, I took the 40 best free throw shooters in the NBA 2 years ago when I did my little study. And of the 40 best free throw shooters, 21 of them had both toes at the target. So just a little over half. And you say, well, then 19 of them had their feet turned. Not quite. 21 had both toes at the target. Another 6 or so, I can't remember the exact number, had dominant foot, or if they're right-handed, having their right foot pointed at the target and their left foot pointed out. So they had 1 foot at the target. Another 2 had that foot at the target, this foot pigeon-toed a little bit. Another, I think it was about 4, had the slightest turn that I had to acknowledge somebody else might call that a turn, even though I would call it square. To me, this is square. Okay? And then only 3 had a significant turn when they shot free throws. Here's why I think it matters so much. Let's go back to your center of gravity. If you point your toes at the target, when you rock up onto your toes and then imagining going up into the air from there, your center of gravity is moving up, which is positive power, and slightly at the target, which is positive power. Why does my center of gravity matter? Because it's going to indicate the line of travel for my shooting hand. And if I rock up onto my toes here, then I've got my shooting hand moving up and along the target line while I'm trying to shoot the ball up and along the target line. They fit together. If you turn your feet, your center of gravity is still moving up, but it's now moving across your target line. For a right-handed shooter, it's now moving to their left, which means that hand is moving up and to the left while trying to shoot the ball straight. And it's harder to do. And you see a lot of players, and Steph is a great example of that. When he shoots free throws, he does turn his feet. That accidentally happens. When he has time to be mindful, Steph Curry points the toes at the target. So this is what he intends to do, and this is what he wants to do when he has time to set up. And when he's not being mindful, does he make that mistake? Yes. And he shoots a lower percentage. So try it, in my opinion, try to avoid turning your feet, because you're creating energy that goes that direction that you're going to give to the basketball. And you get a lot of players who, I've just been telling you, I want the index finger on the bottom of the basketball. You turn your feet, and most players release off their middle finger because now they have a little bit more pressure over on the left side of the ball, which will push the ball right because their feet are turned to the left. And you constantly get this, and it's going to happen. It's always going to happen. You're going to have, I think Klay Thompson does a fantastic job. He's constantly compensating for little mistakes on individual shots. We're talking about habits and trying to build as strong habits as we possibly can. So that's kind of why I talk about toes at the target. Another shooting non-negotiable, or shooting negotiable, pardon me. I want to push evenly with my legs as much as I possibly can. When I watch a player, when I was watching the girls warm up here before, I watch their feet. Are they wide enough to be able to create, to stop bad energy when they start moving? And then do they push evenly with their legs? If you can push, in a theoretical world, if you could push 50-50 with both legs, you're going to jump straight up and down, creating energy at the target. That's great. Positive power being created. If you push more with one leg than the other, you're going to lean off the other direction, create energy that way that you're going to have to compensate for, or you're going to miss this direction. To make it easier for yourself to push evenly with both legs, put them in similar positions. So again, in a perfect world, which shooting a basketball in a game is not, in a perfect world, I would want your feet level. Steve Nash, again, when we talk about Steve Nash shooting free throws, he was here. Feet totally level, toes at the target, feet nice and wide apart. Okay? He claimed, I talked to him about this one time, he says, well, no, I have a stagger, and I look down, I'm like, you do? He's like, it's about a centimeter. To me, like, that is square. And this is an important an important thing for us to understand as coaches. There's the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. I would like you to be able to push evenly with your legs. Do I have a chance of doing that from this position? Yes, I do. Do I have a chance of doing that from this position? Yes, it's just harder. They're in different positions, and I'm going to ask them to do the same thing so that I can push straight up and down. It's harder when they're in different positions. Make it as easy as possible. And I love doing this with kids. I may as well do this with you guys now. Raise your hand if you were taught or you teach to get if you're a right-handed shooter, your right foot slightly forward. Raise your hand if that's what you teach or what you were taught. Awesome. Keep your hand up if how much you were taught to get your right or how much you teach is about half of your foot width, or length of your foot. Okay? For the people who put your hands down, do you teach or were you taught more of a stagger than half of your foot or less of a stagger? More or less? Just shout it out. Anybody teach more? No one. Awesome. So we've just decided that everybody here teaches somewhere in between that point and this point. Outstanding. Do I have a chance to push evenly with my legs in this position? 100%. Especially game speed. Am I really going to argue with you over getting your foot 2 inches in front? No, I want as square as possible. I want as even as possible. This is not a perfect world. Shooting in a game is not a perfect world. You do the best that you possibly can to understand what needs to happen. We want an even leg push. Put your legs in roughly the same position. Is this roughly the same? Yes. Will I let a player have this? Happily. Because I think the comfort level on this kind of an issue is as important as the potential 1 or 2 more shots out of 1,000 that they might make. Okay? And you're always having that discussion with yourself. Is this worth the work? Is the potential payoff of this work worth it? And if it's not, don't do it. If little Sally's 9, excuse me, and her reason for playing basketball is that she likes hanging out with her friends, and you know that when she's 10, she's going to be playing soccer, and when she's 11, she's going to be playing volleyball, and she's just that person. Awesome. Let her be that person. Don't necessarily fight that battle and say, oh, Sally, it's really important for you to even out your, like Coach Dave Love said that you had to be as square as possible. No, that battle's not worth fighting. It's important for her to have fun. Now, if you've got somebody who's on the bubble of making the team next year, and you've got some time to work on something, and that's their biggest bad habit that's holding them back is they can't control their leg push because their legs are in different positions, then that's a battle that maybe you do fight because the payoff is going to be worth it. You're constantly asking yourself those questions, and you never really know the answers. All right. I'll do one more, and then we'll get into some questions. The ball path, how the ball gets from theoretically triple threat, which I know in games we rarely are able to shoot out of this starting point, how we get from here through our set point to our release point. I call that the ball path. I would like, in a perfect world, and again, shooting is not a perfect world, I would like the ball to be as close to the middle as possible, maybe shaded slightly to your shooting hand side. Never shaded at all to your non-shooting hand side. I believe that's a detriment, and I'll get into that in a second. The reason I would like middle of the body as much as possible, well, I want a straight line because straight lines are the easiest things to repeat. So we want to get as close to that as we possibly can. And I want the ball up the middle of the body as much as we possibly can because that gets the ball on line with both of your eyes. And we have a ton of discussion about dominant eye. I don't get too hung up on dominant eye. I don't care about it that much because the reality is both of them are important. I want both eyes. We worry about dominant eye when we have a two-dimensional target. When you're throwing a dart, you're not worried about depth. You're throwing through the target. When you're firing a rifle, you're firing through a target. You're not worried about the depth of it. When you're shooting a basketball, you're worried about this, and you're worried about that, but you're also worried about this. And our depth perception comes from the fact that we have two eyes. So as much as possible, I would like the ball to get on line with both of your eyes. Some people are going to say, well, the ball how can you see the target if the ball is in front of your eyes? Well, because it's only in front of your eyes for a fraction of a second. And something will be in front of your eyes. If you move the ball over to the side, your arm is still going in front of your eyes. So if this is a detriment, then that would be as well. Don't get hung up on it. Something's in front of your eyes, yes, for about the same amount of time that you blink. And when you blink, you don't open your eyes back up and go, oh my God, everything's changed. Nothing's changed. We're still fine. So as on line with the middle of your body as possible so that you're using both eyes. If you're going to shade it one direction, let it go to their shooting hand side of their body. In my opinion, the less that happens, the better. I want it in the middle. I'm happy to settle for over their right eye if they're right-handed. I'll begrudgingly accept over their ear, but you better be able to prove to me that you can repeat it over and over again. We start to get off the shoulder. I start to get really nervous because if I walked into a bank to rob the bank, I'm not going to fire the gun like this. If I'm Robin Hood, I'm not bow and arrow doing this. If I'm playing pool, I don't make the shots that I have to lean across the table and do this very often. Okay? We want to get our eyes as involved as we possibly can, so don't let it drift too far. Talked about I don't want it going over on the non-shooting hand side even at all. Here's why. Right-handed shooter. I would want to be starting somewhere around this position. Okay? If you push the ball over onto your non-shooting hand side, what happens with most players is their shooting hand gets over on the side of the basketball. They're not able to stay on the middle of it along the target line, so they go into this position. Now, my hand isn't in a position to lift the ball up, but it wouldn't be over here either. It's also not in a position to push the ball along the target line. It's in a position to push the ball that way. Okay? Then as I start to lift it up, I'm still not, I'm getting into a position to lift the ball up. It's still not quite there, but it's also not along the target line. It's going to go over this direction now. And now as I'm coming up here, now I'm starting to get the up, and I'm starting to get along the target line, but it's still not fully there. And then by that release point, hopefully we're on the bottom of the basketball. You don't have up set up, and you don't have along the target line set up. But if you can get the ball in the middle of your body or slightly shaded to that shooting hand side, now I'm in a position to push it down, but along my target line. If I take away my non-shooting hand right now and push with my shooting hand, the ball is going to go on the target line. Here, if I take away my non-shooting hand and push with my shooting hand, it's going along the target line. I lift it to there. It's going slightly up and along the target line. And when I get here, up and along the target line. You always have along the target line set up if you can keep the ball in the middle of your body or slightly shaded to the shooting hand side. You cannot have either of them set up in the beginning if the ball is coming up the left side of your body. Okay? So it's just harder to repeat that motion because you're trying to get two things synchronized in the middle of a quick, complex motion, and it's harder to do. Okay? Again, we want to try and simplify things as much as possible. Do we have time for one more? We'll talk about the guide hand for a second because I know this is a big thing, especially with youth players. Please understand, guide hand issues are usually shooting hand problems. And there's always, I shouldn't say there's always, there's often a cause and effect of different habits. And you need to figure out as a coach, is this thing that I'm seeing that I don't like, is that the cause or is that the effect of another cause? And non-shooting hand issues, guide hand issues, are shooting hand problems. This is the effect. This is the cause. Shooting hand ends up over on the right hand side of the basketball, is pushing to the left. Their body feels it, and their body says, I don't want the ball going to the left, I want it going to the straight, so I got to create some right energy to cancel it out. This starts when they're 8, and they start shooting like this, and as they get older, it improves, but it doesn't improve in one day and go from this is terrible to this is perfection in one day. It slowly starts to happen, and the reality is most players get to pretty good at this and then stop that progression. And they end up with just a little bit out of position and a sneaky little move with their non-shooting hand. And they've got that scope. It's fairly narrow, but it's still working across the target line. We want to try and get as much as we can on the bottom of the basketball so that we can take our non-shooting hand off. First thing that you need to fix when you see a non-shooting hand issue, and I wouldn't worry about this, even though 10 and 11-year-olds are terrible at this, I wouldn't worry about correcting it until they're strong enough to be able to do it. So I wouldn't worry about it really until 14 or so. Maybe a little bit younger, maybe a little bit older. And some of the notes, remind me to tell you about my notes here in a second. I forgot to do that at the beginning. In some of my notes, I've got like what I would teach different age groups. And we'll go into that in a little bit. But getting your non-shooting hand off the basketball, first you have to correct the shooting hand position. We got to get on the bottom of the basketball, because if you just try and correct the non-shooting hand, you're just exposing this mistake, and the player, even if they're not aware of it, they can feel something's not right, and they say, well, either I get yelled at to take my non-shooting hand off the ball, or I do that and the ball goes to the left. Therefore, this coach is an idiot. They don't know what they're talking about. No, you're a very smart person. They just don't understand the real problem. We got to fix that shooting hand. So we got to drill getting into the middle of the basketball as much as we can with the shooting hand. Then we can learn to get our non-shooting hand off the ball. If you have your phones or something that's connected to Wi-Fi right now, if you go to coachdavelove.com/Winnipeg, all of my notes from this session, the session that I'm going to do tomorrow, and a third session that I won't be doing here in Winnipeg, but it's the how I would build a shooting program, what I would teach to different age groups. Those 3 sets of notes will be on that page, coachdavelove.com/Winnipeg. I just set that link up this morning, and I forgot to test it. If that doesn't work, go coachdavelove.com/Australia. I was there last month, and I know that one works, and it's the exact same page. Just with, I want to create a little URL that was specific to you guys. So you'll also notice on there, there's a the place that you can click to sign up for my newsletter. If you're not on my newsletter now, this is something that I offer. I put out a weekly teaching point. Sometimes it's based around a story about a player and what they worked on. Sometimes it's just like a really technical thing. It goes out once a week, and then I'm giving you now opportunities to choose what you want to learn about first. So I'm able to customize your learning experience for you a little bit more. So you can look for that on coachdavelove.com, or there's a link on coachdavelove.com/Winnipeg if you're there. And then there's also a form there that or button that you can click if one day you would like to host one of my shooting clinics for the players at your school or within your club or wherever. You can click there and find out about how to apply to host clinics. So that's what I wanted to get into. I do want to leave some time for questions. Don't be shy. You are allowed to disagree with me. I'm not, again, teaching you how shooting should be taught. I'm just teaching you how I teach shooting, and hopefully giving you some ideas on how you can maybe improve or change the way that you do it. So if there's anything that you would like to know more specifically, fire away and don't worry about hurting my feelings. Coach. I did not mention that. So I should probably take the basketball. Almost everything for me comes down to the set point. And to me, the set point is, to me, it's the most important position in shooting a basketball. It's really where your shot begins, and if you can be in the correct positions by that point, then we're going to be great. So can I take away my non-shooting hand now? For most of us, My hand isn't big enough, my shooting hand isn't big enough to be able to control the ball. And I like to give this really obvious example to players because I think it shows them kind of what we're talking about. I can't take away my non-shooting hand now. My shooting hand isn't in a position to do all the work. I can't take it away now. My shooting hand is in a position to be able to do all the work. Can I take away my non-shooting hand now? Yes. Now my shooting hand is in a position to control the ball on its own. So the guide hand is really just on the basketball to help the ball get to that set point. That's when it starts to come off. And we may not see it actually coming off until higher. We may not see like the separation between hand and ball until about here, but it should be starting to come off around that set point. So that that shooting hand motion, which is hopefully in the right position, can take over fully, and now we have one variable rather than two variables. Coach. How do I do it? I drill the set point like crazy. So poor Tristan Thompson, for 1 month, did about 3 different variations of a drill where we learned, here's where the set point is, index finger on the bottom of the ball, our non-shooting hand will start to come off, so let's take it off already. Hold this position, learn where this position is, learn how to make that move. And the poor guy at 6'10" and 240 pounds would shoot for a month from 10 feet, like 2 big steps inside the free throw line, to learn where this position was and how to make that simple move, because it was his brand new hand. He hadn't shot with that hand. Aaron Gordon and I, we did the same sort of little variations of those drills for like same basic idea of that, but with some variety to it for 2 weeks. Raise your hand if you have your players doing form shooting of some kind. Awesome. Challenge yourself now. Next time you're in your practice, look at the form shooting that they're doing and ask yourself, constructively, is this a body position that looks like a shot? What drives me, I hate seeing form shooting that looks like that. It's just sloppy and you're practicing a skill that is never going to be used. So if you're going to do something like form shooting and you're really going to isolate that habit, I try and do it as precisely as possible. And you're already doing, most of us are already doing that kind of work already, but I bet if you kind of step back, especially with younger boys, I bet it looks really sloppy. So just take that time, be more precise with it. If you only get 2 or 3 minutes a day to work on form shooting, excellent. Have it be a fantastic 2 or 3 minutes. Because I have days where Tristan finishes, we played double overtime the night before. He played 52 minutes, and he's exhausted, and we just finished a 3-hour practice. Okay, I had a half an hour work planned for you. Tristan, we're shooting 10 free throws, and you're getting out of here. Like, I have those days too. So you do the best that you can within it, and if you're going to do something that we need precision with, be precise. Don't accept mediocrity if the point of the drill is to be precise. Don't accept sloppy. I know that's not exactly the short answer is I don't know exactly how you can do it, because unfortunately we don't live in the same world, but you're a smart guy that can get creative, and so I think you can probably find 2 or 3 minutes to really start. Then also understand this, and this is the advantage that you guys have. I get a player for 3 months before they play a meaningful game, what I would determine a meaningful game. I hope this doesn't sound egotistical, but you guys, you have your players for 8 years before they play a meaningful game. I know you think that Saturday's game when they're in U12 is really meaningful, but when we step back, I'm a parent of a player in U12. The second we're in the car, she's forgotten that she played a game. Like, she's worried about Dairy Queen right now. Like, that's like, So these games, they're fun for her, and they're like, we want her to perform well, but it's not life or death. Life or death doesn't start, and I'm exaggerating, doesn't start for a while. Always be developing. Be developing the player. Don't worry about the results on tomorrow's game. We have to be improving. So, kind of took a couple tangents there. Anybody else? All right. Now, tomorrow, and jump in if you think of something. Tomorrow, I'll be talking about how I assess a shot, figure out kind of what needs to be improved, what is the habit that's causing a player to miss the shots that they're moving, assessing what is going wrong, isolating that particular habit, and then layering drills to build up a new habit. That's what I'm going to be going into tomorrow. And it's all these little tiny, I really only have about 5 drills that I use, but I have an infinite number of layers that I can add to those drills and to help a player get from wherever their current habit is to where we hopefully want it to be. So I'll give you a glimpse into what that looks like tomorrow.